Wonderful. So welcome everyone to the kickoff of the Innovation That Matters Roundtable series at the SCET Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at UC Berkeley. Hello, I'm Stacey Lawson. I'll be moderating the session today. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders of the SCET. I'm here with Ikhlaq Sidhu, who is our SCET Faculty Director and Chief Scientist, and Ken Singer, Managing Director and Chief Learning Officer, as well as a small set of roundtable panelists, very esteemed, that are with us today. And thought we would just do a very quick round of introductions and then lead into our session. So perhaps Ikhlaq, you could start us off.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Stacey, for starting it off. And I think you've already said everything that I could possibly need to say in my introduction. So yes, I'm Ikhlaq Sidhu. I'm the faculty director and the chief scientist of the center, and also a co-founder along with Stacey from the beginning.
And Ken?
Yes, so I'm Ken Singer. I'm the managing director and chief learning officer here at the SCET Center. I'm focused primarily on curriculum and pedagogy here, and I'm very fascinated about what's happening in the world that I can encourage my students to disrupt.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ed Suhu is here with us on the roundtable. Ed?
Thanks, Stacey. Hi, everyone. Ed Suhu, based here in Oakland, California with Lenovo. And my role is innovation and transformation, engaging with C-level executives across multiple verticals. In addition to that, I have 8 startups under my belt and about 16 large enterprise companies as part of my experience built.
Thank you for being here. Etienne Defarge, welcome.
Thank you, Stacey. Hello, everyone. I'm a partner at Chicago Pacific Founders, private equity in healthcare. French aeronautical engineer by training, MS Berkeley, MBA Harvard, careers in aeronautics and energy, and for the last 15 years in healthcare. I'm a serial healthcare IT entrepreneur with several IPOs and exits, and today serve on a number of healthcare company boards, including the executive council at the Harvard School of Public Health. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you. Okay, how about Roy Kong? Welcome, and share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Stacey. So hi, everybody. This is Roy Kong, and a partner of SCET Angel Fund. We invest in AI new technology companies at angel stage. And I have been in the Valley for 25 years, primarily a chip guy since 30 years ago. And right now, I'm also executive in AI chip company, like a kind of unicorn at this moment. Yeah, nice to be here.
Thank you. And Tas Nirmala, sorry, excuse me for, maybe you can do a better job of that.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm Tas Nirmala from University of Melbourne. I'm a faculty member at the Department of Electronic Engineering. My interests are in communications, and I'm in the process of setting up a wireless innovations lab, working closely with a number of wireless companies.
Thank you, Tas. And we have Mike Kriaku, who is hopefully going to be joining in when we get his technology issues settled. But Mike is an entrepreneurial technology executive and an industry fellow here at UC Berkeley. So we'll hopefully welcome him when we can. And welcome to everyone else who's joined us today, for all of the attendees and participants. Really great to have you here. And if you have any comments or questions during our hour, please type them into the chat. We'll be using that as our main vehicle for funneling questions. We'll try to surface those as in the discussion if possible, and certainly want to have as much engagement as possible. So let me just start with a quick frame and welcome Mike. Glad you're here. We just did a quick intro of you.
Yes, that's right. I heard, and quite accurate. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So what brings us together today? We all know it's about COVID-19 and about innovation. And as many of us have experienced, there's been really widespread health concerns, financial disruption, breakdowns in our supply chains, and many other adverse effects that have that have contributed to disruptions in our society and our economy. And as we all know, that disruption inevitably also leads to opportunity and to new winners and new losers in the broader landscape. So we'll be kind of exploring that today and how innovation will play into the way our industries are becoming reshaped, as well as what each of us can do in our various industries and companies to help bring innovation that will allow us to thrive, flourish, and survive the COVID times and design our new post-COVID world. So with that, I thought I'd just start off with some engagement overall with a couple of polls to see where folks are at currently. The first is hopefully a bit of a provocative question about the new nature of work and working from home. Is it the new normal? So if you could bring up the poll, Jennifer, the question is about how much longer will you be engaging with your organization primarily virtually? And this could be your school, your company, your NGO, your church, whatever your primary organization is. Is that through Labor Day, through the end of the year, through 2021? You'll remain virtual indefinitely. Perhaps you're already back to work, or you never actually left the physical workplace for some of us. And it looks like looks like a lot of folks are saying 45% that they actually believe they'll remain virtual indefinitely. That's quite profound.
I think something happened on that poll. Those numbers were all completely different. And then I think it reset back to zero. So I think we only got the last few votes. I think you might just retake that one.
Is it possible, let's see, to relaunch the polling? Okay, if everyone could just type in their answers once again.
Yeah.
Okay, so 48% through the end of the year, and a fairly large portion, though, still saying that remaining virtual will be a longer term, perhaps indefinite experience. Okay, so let's go to the next poll, Jennifer. And this is related to the impact of COVID-19 on our companies and organizations and their ability to fully recover. I'm still seeing the initial poll. If we could go to the next poll, please. Here, oh, there we go. So what will it take your company or organization to fully recover from the pandemic? Either radically adapting your product and service to new demands in the market, changing the business model, proactively innovating that for survival, waiting for the market to return if that's a possibility, so just hold tight and do nothing, improving operations to serve what may be already existing demand or perhaps even growing demand from the pandemic, or pursuing innovation to address new growth opportunities. And you actually have the opportunity here to select all that apply. So it looks like most folks here are having some necessity to change their business model, 83%. That's quite interesting. And many, 42%, pursuing new growth opportunities.
I think can we redo that poll as well? For some reason, it keeps closing out the poll early, and there's people who want to add their votes. So maybe we could do this one again.
Okay.
As well. Is there a reason why it keeps closing out?
Apparently we need to innovate their polling technology.
Yeah, so that might be a bug that's masquerading as a feature, so we might want to let
Right. So without going into debugging Zoom's issues, it's possible that when one of the hosts also votes, that it somehow stops the polling. So I think anyone who thinks they might be a host, don't vote and try it again.
Got it.
I'm going to relaunch one more time.
one more time.
Okay.
I'll send a note to the CTO, Harry Mosley, about this.
Let's do it.
See if you can get him to join the call right now.
There we go. Wow, 30, 32.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so we
Interesting.
have a better picture now.
Mhm.
Well, lots of innovation demanded across the board, it appears. So hopefully we'll be able to share some insights and thoughts on that as we go forward today. So why don't we start with a question for Ikhlaq and perhaps Ken as well. So whether it's the COVID-19 pandemic, the social upheaval and the societal norms that we see shifting right now, whether it's climate change or food security or any other black swan event, really, why is focusing on innovation essential to help organizations adapt to make the biggest impact on society now? I mean, you guys are in the forefront of innovation and innovation education. So, and I would say some part of the backdrop of this question is really, why are you doing this series now? And why is it particularly relevant? And what do you want to share as we launch into the conversation?
Yeah, okay. I think we'll have probably multiple facets to that answer. So I can just start that off. Why don't we start with that backdrop question? And for me, first of all, this innovation that matters topic, Innovation X and innovation that matters are basically synonymous. And what's happened is there's a lot of change that's been happening in these last, we'll say, 6 months. And innovation before this time and innovation after this time has actually changed a bit. Innovation before this time was many times a lot of nice to have kind of thing. You know, it was, how will the future be like? Wouldn't it be nice if we could have this nice feature to be able to 3D print our tennis shoes at home? Or, you know, they're kind of far off types of vitamins that sound, you know, where is the world going? Since all this change has happened, innovation has become, I think, almost necessary because everyone has to adapt, everyone has to adjust very quickly. And frankly, it's kind of more real and more genuine, much less theater, much less just about, you know, the gloss of it. And so I think just really the nature of innovation in terms of the time and the importance and how genuine it is to really be able to adjust for the changes in the world. I think that's the essence of what it is. And this series, to me, is for us to all understand what these things are and how we all each participate. And that includes Berkeley. How does Berkeley participate in those changes that are happening?
And anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, so I'll just maybe go a little bit provocative on this, which is when you have these black swan events, right? You have a complete reordering of the world, and not one out of design. So it's not like we're going to make things more efficient, we're going to make things better. It's that systems are collapsing and they're going to be reaching a new equilibrium and a new set of priorities that will be put in place that none of us have much control over. Mm-hmm. So things like Amazon becoming basically everyone's store because you can't drive to the store in certain places. So it becomes the de facto dominant player. And now they have so much power just overnight. What do we do? Right? Suddenly just fortunes have been created. They've been taken away. Look at the difference between Zoom and WeWork. They've completely flipped their fortunes, right? And so this is happening. It happened all of a sudden in March, April when we shut down. But I think you're going to see a slow motion train wreck of cascading effects across all of our industries because of that. And you know, most of us here who are on this call will do fine. I think we'll all have jobs. We'll all find ways because we've been trained for this moment to be prepared for these kinds of disruptions. But the vast majority of people are not. They are used to their 9-to-5 jobs. They're used to dropping off their kids at daycare. They're used to having summer camp so that their kids are, I mean, there's a pattern to life that is completely disrupted. And I noticed it from my standpoint because I have students who failed to launch their jobs, their internships, they're all gone. So from my perspective, I'm trying to figure out how do I prepare this generation for just endless disruption, because I think this is just portending for bigger and harder disruptions. But you know, how do we make our companies more resilient to these kinds of things, to not just survive through this through cuts, but actually grow through it through innovation? So that's kind of what I'm hoping that these conversations will illuminate, is ways that we can identify and share with other people on how we might be able to grow through this.
Yeah.
Great. Well, sort of as a step towards that, maybe we can zero in a little bit around observations on the Delta, kind of the then versus now. What are more precisely some of the challenges or the kind of the implications of the disruption that we're seeing with COVID? So maybe back to you, Ken, and then we'll also move to our roundtable panel. So as it relates to the COVID disruption, which industries are you seeing have been most hit? And what are the underlying dynamics that those industries are struggling with? Are they short-term in nature? Is this long-term? Like, how do they characterize how to think about that? And sort of your sense of what we're facing?
Yeah, I think I would put it in, there were healthy and unhealthy companies before COVID. And the companies that were really unhealthy, it's become very clear they've always been unhealthy. So the companies that have been living off of debt, that they were private equity controlled, you know, they've been cutting resources and cutting their innovation, cutting other things prior to COVID. They're the ones who were the first to go look for a handout from the government because they couldn't survive even a month. So you see a lot of retail because so much of retail went to private equity, you know. They can't cover pensions, they can't cover anything. A lot of them are gone. And so I think the first thing you see is it's a health check. You know, if we're looking at what Etienne, you know, you're in healthcare, it's kind of like a diagnostic. You've been diagnosed with COVID, your company's been diagnosed with COVID, and if you've have underlying conditions already, you're gonna die, right? So the metaphor that we're seeing in human health, I think you see that with these companies. Etienne, maybe I can pass it to you if you have some thoughts.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ken. I will comment on healthcare and the stress, what you and Ikhlaq have said, that one big gap for innovation between COVID and after COVID is moving forward, innovation will have to have a very clear purpose. It will have to be problem solving as opposed to nice to have. So a couple examples in healthcare. Number one, as you probably have read, not only we run out of basically basic healthcare sanitizing equipment supplies like masks and gloves at the beginning of this crisis in New York, but now we have a resurgence in the South and the West. It's happening again. So clearly here, we have a broken supply chain and a profound realization in an industry that is already very domestic. By definition, hospitals are, for the most part, domestic, that we have to prepare ourselves for a world that's no longer going to be so globalized, but tripolar. You're going to have a block around China, you're going to have a block around the US and Canada, and you're going to have a block around Europe. Yeah. Today, it doesn't work like that way. The reason we have shortages of simple things as masks and gloves is most of them come from China. Right. So from a technology standpoint, these should advantage 3D printing, because we talk a lot about AI and so forth, and of course that has a role to play in healthcare with diagnostics and so forth, but think about 3D printing as the key to bring simple stuff back home. And when I think of basic healthcare supplies we no longer have because our global supply chain is broken, we're going to have to act in that regard, and 3D printing is going to be a big tool. On a bigger picture, as you know, we spend more per capita than anybody else on the planet. Until 2019, we spent 3.6 trillion in healthcare. That's basically the GDP of Germany. about 11,000 per habitant. Interestingly enough, it looks like we're going to spend about 40% less than that the first 6 months of the year. So inadvertently, whereas our healthcare spending has outpaced inflation for 20 years, we, just on the base of these first 6 months of the year, we're going to have a phenomenal decrease in healthcare expenditures in 2020. My own forecast is it'll be from 3.6 trillion to 2.5 trillion, absolutely unheard of. And that raises fundamental questions, and also for innovation, which is, have we been consuming healthcare too much? Because for the folks that have not been victims of the virus, but have not been willing to go to the optician to do a routine procedure, they realize that, hey, I'm just as well as I was before, and I don't miss not spending 3 days in hospital or the half a dozen doctor visits I didn't do. And of course, telehealth will play a big role in that as well. So again, I think you'll see healthcare shift, not only on the supply chain for things, but also on the volume of treatments that people actually need. Because if there is one key lesson from these 6 months, apart again from the patients of COVID, that's 3 million, that's a lot, but still, compared to the population, it's a small percentage. The loud and clear answer is like, maybe we don't need that much healthcare. So innovation that will bring things that take place at the hospital or the doctors at home through telehealth, simplification, the whole thing, are going to have a big, big say in the future.
It sounds a bit like a broad message on shift to essentials. So not only what are the projects to be worked on, but even in terms of our consumption. Well, if we can delay going to the doctor this month, we're doing it because, we don't want to take a chance of getting another problem. So whatever is not essential, we've just shifted, the pendulum has swung to the, well, if you don't need it right now, let's not do it. And I mean, and not just in healthcare, I'm saying across the board in everything.
Ed or Bas, you want to add in some thoughts? Ed?
Yeah, so, in my conversations with clients, I was chatting with a retail store that has 3,000 convenience stores, and we were chatting, and he was saying, yeah, this recovery is going to be really challenging. I said, yeah. I said, why are you thinking recovery? He goes, what do you mean? I said, it's a renaissance. It's a whole different mindset when people are coming back out of the dark ages, right? They've been reprioritizing their social, their business, their family, a whole host of different things that changed their mindset. In your repositioning of your company, how are you addressing the renaissance of your customer, the renaissance of your workforce, the renaissance of your supply chain? What used to be just in time over the last decade around supply chain is now just in case. So there's some fascinating dynamics that are going on. So I'd like to shift your thinking, because right now you're in what I call tactical mode. I want you to go into strategic mode and to go from survive to thrive. And what's it going to take to reassess, retrain, and redeploy your workforce to handle this new renaissance, right? What do your partner ecosystems look like to address that? So there's some fascinating dynamics where back to ... back to office, back to plant, back to school, back to what? What, there is no normal anymore. It is what you want it to be. And the need to combine, and from an innovation standpoint, it's not just technology. It is to combine fresh eyes and wise eyes into the new sort of dynamics that we're seeing in the workplace today.
I think that leads us into the kind of conversation around approaching and navigating innovation and change under these new conditions. I love the Renaissance idea, Ed. Thank you for that. Maybe I can direct us back over to Ikhlaq for a moment around the question of, so in light of those comments about Renaissance, how can companies change and adapt their innovation practices to that thriving that Ed mentioned, as opposed to just whatever might be in place in their R&D function? How do they need to reorganize? How do they need to rethink? What is the new new normal for innovation, given the challenges and opportunities that he just shared.
Yeah, okay, all right. And clearly everyone has like, I can basically start this conversation. I think everyone's got like great contributions to get a richer understanding of the topic. But I would say, you know, there's at least a couple dynamics going on. One, we already said everything is kind of like shorter in time scale, more immediate, more essential, all of that's going on. But I think the other thing is that, you know, the demand landscape is changing or has changed, and it's changed very quickly. So I'll start with the simplest of the kind of divisions of the demand landscape. There's kind of a traditional set of demands that were all related to space and social proximity and all, you know, like whether you're a hotel or, you know, in airplanes or, you know, conventions and getting people together. So like there's all these kind of businesses that relied on those aspects. And then there's another set, which we were just talking about, have been frankly booming, you know, like, you know, they have, you know, Zoom is doing better, Amazon's doing better. There's this, like, if you're on one side of this digitally accelerated world, you're actually doing fine. And if you're on the other side of this digitally, you know, not accelerated world, then you're in this stuck question of, do I wait, or is there something that I can do to adapt to be part of the other version? So, you know, if you're a hotel, then, you know, either you're going to say, well, maybe I'm just going to wait. Or maybe you're going to be more proactive and you'll start saying, okay, well, what is it going to take before people feel comfortable, the new demand set, the new way people think, what does it take for the people to feel comfortable coming into the hotel? And, you know, there you're seeing like new ways to check in where you don't meet anyone. The remote control is going to disappear from the room. There's nothing that you can touch. It's getting, you know, before no hotel would have ever advertised a branding partnership with Clorox. You know, that would be just like ridiculous. And, you know, now it's like, what's the best brand you can, you know, associate yourself with? You know, it's the one that, you know, brings you into like this new safe version. Yeah. So, you know, your basic question is, well, how does innovation change? And what I'm saying is, depends who you are. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you're Zoom, then, you know, you got a lot more demand and you got to basically run it well. And, you know, that's a different problem. You know, you're going to incrementally improve, fix security things, you know, whatever they are. If you are, you know, an airline, you've got, you know, you can't just make your current offering better in the way it was before. Now you've got to make your offering work for this new set of demand. And that's what innovation really means there, is to adjust for the way the world works. The last thing, yeah.
One thing that you're mentioning but not using the words is it's luck, right? Because these shifts occur and suddenly what you're working on is no longer relevant or now is critical. You were just bringing this up about hotels, but I stayed at a hotel a long time ago, 9 months ago, and they had Alexa in their hotel. I'm like, oh, why would I need that in the hotel? Like, you know, it's nice to have at home, but like, it's not critical. But today, with you not wanting to touch anything, like that technology suddenly became much more relevant because of our touch phobia now, right? Because of COVID. So there's luck involved in this as well. We always talk about innovation requiring us to be good and smart and clever, but there's also that, like, you know, the Chinese appreciate luck. Fortune is a key component of success in that culture. And that's something that I'm drawn to, is that sometimes it just requires just good fortune.
Well, I think if you go back to this digital divide thing, I think maybe it's lucky if you happen to be on the right side and the correct side of it, but it's also how proactive and what's your mindset. You know, we've had a lot of conversation already about, you know, taking this not defensively but proactively. But if you happen to have been proactively moving into, you know, even 20% of the digital world, then you've already taken 3 steps, and now you can take 2 more, and you're kind of there. I mean, really, what happened with COVID, we just took like a giant step into the digital world. Anything that you can do digitally, that works great. Anything you can't do digitally, it just didn't work so well. So I think, you know, like if Blockbuster was around today compared to Netflix, they would feel that pain even more because they weren't proactive in that way.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The jump into the digital world has given us the embracing of, you know, change, but also technologies. But there's a backlash to that, and that's going to be fatigue. So there's some very interesting dynamics that are starting to happen where, Ken, you mentioned you're on your 6th Zoom call. There is earphone fatigue. There's all sorts of demand type scenarios these collaboration tools and technologies have given us, but it also pushes the boundaries of, you know, being, you know, having that personal time, that time that gives you that respite, that time that gives you the opportunity to recharge. So there's some very interesting dynamics as in a lot of my conversations. It's not so much, is it temperature check and face mask compliance, is what are all the things that you're providing to your staff, your customers, you know, and what I call the 3 E's: meet and exceed the expectations, deliver it through a stellar experience, and earn the right to engagement. Every one of those E's are absolutely critical, and every one of those companies have to revisit what those 3 E's mean to them and how they deliver them and execute them with and without technology.
But the good news on the right side of the digital world and the technology divide is one thing we've learned throughout this pandemic is that doing stuff from home, even with at the risk of having a little Zoom fatigue, is a lot more productive than the old way. In 2019, I went 6 times to the East Coast for board meetings, 6 times to Europe, all with boards I've known people for years. I would expect that no matter what happens, even if a vaccine is found tomorrow, the 6 times to the East Coast are going to fall to 2, maximum 3, and same for Europe. And hotels, it's a good example to use, Ikhlaq hotels, same for the airlines. They're going to have to do some real thinking so that they don't become the equivalent of US passenger railroads in the 50s, because there are trips that we all want to take, a vacation and so forth, and that will probably come back to the fullest extent. But those, by the way, are principally for the airlines, relatively low fares and low bucks. The big bucks are of the business trips, the type I take as a board member, formerly 12 times a year, in the future 3-4 times a year. And think about it, if I go to a meeting in Boston for a half-a-day board meeting, it's a 3-day affair. Yeah. It's 6 hours to get in the hotel, 2 nights. I'm so happy to ditch that through the window. There's no fun in staying in a hotel after having landed Boston Logan in winter at midnight. So hotels and airlines, for example, it's not just a question of waiting for the future. They're going to lose basically a whole bunch of their lavishly paying business clientele, because we all found inadvertently that, yes, the 6 Zoom call may be a bit tiring, but 12 hours of airplane time in 2 days, it's no fun either. So we're all going to choose Zoom in the future.
Let me, Ken, before you go, let me just say this one thing. I think there's a generalization of what we're talking about here, which is this pendulum is kind of swinging back and forth. So it's kind of like at one time, go back to the restaurant analogy, but it just kind of goes with everything here. It's if last year everything was dine-in and this year everything is takeout, next year it's not going back to dine-in. Next year, it's, to your point on the hotels or whichever, will it be 50%? Will it be 30%? Will it be 70%? There's a new balance. Even after the crisis part of this is over, we found a certain efficiency. I actually was talking to someone who teaches in Europe, and now they're actually going back into classroom. Like they've kind of been through their, having to do everything on Zoom, and they went into the classroom, and a few students are online and some people are there in person. And they said, I was dying to get back home and go back to talking to everyone on Zoom, because it was actually a more direct, better experience than when they were trying to do it in the classroom.
Well,
I mean,
so can I
surprised to hear that.
So I want to connect the dots here a bit, because Etienne used a term that I think we might all have different definitions for, which is productive, right? And so you say we're more productive. Yes, I lose a lot of time when I travel, and I travel like 60, 70% of the time as well. Not in the nice hotels as you, Etienne, since you're doing it on behalf of the board, but it's grueling to do that travel. But it's weird for me. Productivity happens in Zoom because I'm exhausted. So what Ed brought up about this exhaustion actually drives towards decision making, because at some point I'm just tired of being in Zoom and just like, let's get it to a decision. Let's get, so it's almost as if there's a forcing function that occurs with this new world. This kind of technology exhaustion almost forces you to be productive. Otherwise you're in a perpetual hell because you're at home. It's not like you can get away from it. You don't have the excuse, I need to go home. You're already there. You actually have to make a decision.
It's also what I'm saying though. It's like, I don't think being on Zoom all the time is the answer, but I think it's just a new balance. And I think we're going to be traveling again. There's things you have to do to travel. But as Etienne said, will it be 12 trips or will it be 4? It's going to change the new demand model. And you can keep going with the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, you will reserve travel for entrepreneurial activities when you actually need to meet a new group of people and get comfortable with them. Once you've established the dynamics, the group dynamics, that makes Zoom calls relatively less tiring, because you already know each other. I found on boards I've been for 5, 6 years, Zoom calls are very relaxing because we know each other. Also, yes, we can have technology overload, but the fixes to that are very easy and straightforward. Maybe you'll reschedule your life so maybe you don't do more than 4 or 5 Zoom calls a day, and they're spaced out so you have an hour in between to collect your thoughts and prepare. That still would be immensely more productive than to travel, because when you travel, if you're lucky, if you have to go far away, maybe you do a couple meetings away from home per day, and then you have to travel again. So I think the adaptation to this new world is going to be relatively straightforward. Steps are going to be taken, but we will learn. And then the positive thing is, I don't like traveling all the time. At one point in my life, United put my name on an airplane because I was the 3rd most passenger, and it was ridiculous. However, now that I have not traveled since basically January, I kind of miss it a little bit. So if we have a face-to-face meeting, one of these boards in Boston or New York or Paris in January or February next year, I'll gladly come. But then I won't come back in February. The fix will last for 6 months, and I'll do another dose in the fall. And we'll find a new equilibrium. But my view is that new equilibrium is going to be more productive, more satisfying, and we'll enjoy not only the time we have at home near our families, but also the time we travel, because there's going to be less of it, and we'll have more time to appreciate it, in addition to the increased productivity.
So I think we're talking a lot about the changing demand landscape and consumer behavior, and that is sort of fueling the need for innovation. I wanted to layer in a question that came from one of the participants earlier before the call, that's kind of a practical on the ground, like nitty gritty, and coming from the company perspective, from the innovator's perspective, which is, the question was, many companies realize the need to transform at times of crisis, but they need quick wins in order to stay afloat during the process. So that's like survival thing, like, okay, we get it, but how do we do it in an incremental way, or in some way that allows us to innovate while we're still like breathing? How do we identify quick wins, and what indicators can we use? So any practical advice? I don't know if Roy or Thas or Mike want to jump in on that one?
So I might just jump in there. One of the things we're seeing here is that there is a kind of willingness to consider immediate and adjacent opportunities. That means a lot of the time companies were go global, but now it seems to be they're looking for partners or opportunities from other companies just around us so that they can actually innovate quickly and get to be in a position they can compete globally. So there is definitely a shift in the focus or mindset among some of the innovators to look for partnership and activities very near to them so that they can, complete the innovation much quicker.
Yeah, so I think the technology is becoming even more important at this period, and so I think it's a good time to innovate. It's a good time to do startups. The impact of the COVID actually, I see from two angles. One is the de-globalization and also de-socialization, right? So everything goes virtual, but it may come back. But I think this virtual collaboration it's a good field to innovate. So besides like meetings, maybe we should do, or something should happen in the future, that it could be a virtual reality or augmented reality. Though like the past 1 to 2 years, that field has not been that good, but I think the COVID may bring life back to this field again. And also the infrastructure of the computing becomes even more heavy loaded. So NVIDIA, market cap, I just passed Intel right yesterday. I think this trend will also continue. So for startups, probably anything to do sensing or contactless, right? Sensing means you don't contact, you can send. So I think sensing, more intelligent applications, and also like virtual reality and related virtual collaboration, that might be a good field to look at.
Great. And Mike, if you want to comment, I want to add another aspect into someone that just wrote in on the chat, which is guidance for executives who know they have to change but have not previously needed innovation. So whether it's around quick wins, I mean, these are very practical sort of like nitty gritty here, quick wins, indicators, or kind of how to transition into innovation that hasn't been required before. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I guess that they're two ends of the spectrum, right? So a quick win versus what should we ultimately do? One is very tactical, I think. I mean, I guess lean thinking still applies even if you're a corporation. So you still want to experiment and try things. You don't want to spend 2 years now launching something new. You want to try something short and sharp, and that's going to completely depend on what it is what kind of business you're in. Yeah. So quick wins is always going to be just a function of any kind of lean rollout that you're doing. In terms of the approach, by and large, I guess what's critical at the moment is first principles thinking. This is, because there's so many paradigm shifts and so much has changed in supply and demand, a lot of organizations have stopped buying in areas, which means they have cash, which means, but then they have, innovation starts with pain. Pain is everywhere, right? Which means there's so many opportunities. So there's a lot of, more than ever, it's absolutely vital to think from first principles, as opposed to, there's a kind of philosophy that often prevails in the Valley where you're thinking, there's a kind of what I would call like cyclic thinking, where you're saying, well, every 5 years this happens, right? Which is classic setup for failure in the when black swans appear. Every 7 years I've noticed such and such happens. That does not apply anymore. So thinking through what's really happening and where the pain really is, that's a much better mindset for setting oneself up for adapting better.
So Mike, maybe I'm gonna take a brutal answer. I think you gave a very nice answer and diplomatic one. And I know the person who asked the question is Graham. The guidance I would give an executive who knows they need to change, but they haven't needed to rely on innovation. I advise that executive to prepare your company for acquisition.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let me give an answer somewhere in the middle of those two. All right. So I think let me address both of those things. One thing that you brought up was the quick wins. One was the whole innovation topic. On the quick wins, I'd say, there are parts of this world, the digital side of it, that are not, completely suffering. So, tuning towards the customers that are not fully paralyzed or that, can actually act right now is probably a good idea, in terms of quick wins. And if you can't do that, I think you really got to employ a strategy of staying connected. So, while they are sorting out, stabilizing, while your customers are figuring out how they can move on, staying connected with them in some meaningful way will be important, because if you lose track now, by the time you come back, there'll be 10 other people that they're talking to. And when they're ready to buy, you won't be the people that they're talking to. On Graham's other question, or Graham's question on, you need to adapt, but you never really thought about innovation. I think the thing is, you probably just defined innovation wrong. So, if your definition of innovation is only advanced technology development, then, that's fine. But just the fact that you need to make some change to, frankly, survive or, make progress in this time means that you need to innovate. And so just take the broader view. That means people have to learn to change their job function, or you have to learn to go into new areas, or whatever it is that you need to do. That's innovation. That narrow one is probably a disservice to, to what you're trying to do.
But in many industries, Ikhlaq and Ken, you're actually both right simultaneously. Let's take a big hospitals. The last 2 years, they expanded, they built lavish rooms, hotel style, because they know half their revenue comes from elective. Well, all that goes to the window today. So the innovation is they're going to maintain contacts with all the patients through telehealth, and they're going to embrace that aggressively. Their insurance companies can support that. But of course, telehealth, back to our productivity discussion, very productive, but it does not use the assets that hospital has mistakenly invested in terms of brick and mortars for the last 3-4 years. And so that's when they're going to have to go to the Ken's solution as well. They're going to have to innovate, to stay in touch with the patient and so forth. At the same time, some consolidation is inevitable because there is some demand, like for rooms taken for elective surgeries and so forth, that's just no longer to be there. And then they're going to have to do what Ken is talking about, prepare to acquire, to consolidate, or prepare to be acquired. So I think both of what you said, in many industries, and I'm thinking hospitals, but I think the same applies to hotels, airlines, will probably have to take place simultaneously.
Yeah, a lot of my conversations actually revolve around not the technology, if I stated a couple of times, it's around leadership and the culture of that leadership as it permeates throughout the organization. I had a chat with an Asian company. They do battery manufacturing, and he goes, "Hey, can you guys sell me some artificial intelligence capabilities to kind of help me increase my quality?" I said, "I understand what you want to accomplish." I said, "But what are the real issues?" He goes, "Well, he went through it." And I said, "You know what? You don't need AI." I said, "You need a better quality component manufacturing agreement, because it is one single component that is failing when you put it all together." I said, "So why are you thinking technology is going to fix this?" I said, "Innovation is kind of a overused word, or even sometimes misused, because we can innovate, but it doesn't really address the business issue." So when I was chatting with the CTO at PepsiCo, we were trying to figure out all these technologies, AI, blockchain, et cetera. And he goes, well, I really don't want to talk about technologies. I said, I understand. If I were in your chair, I would say the same thing because there's no context to the business. So let's see if we can frame the context across the 3 houses of PepsiCo. And he goes, what are the 3 houses? I said, front of house, back of house, and out of house. Front of house is your consumers. Back of house is how you manufacture, distribute, and package. And then out of house is all your suppliers. If I were to look across all 3 houses, what are the most critical areas that you need to address today? Because they're all interconnected and all interrelated. And he goes, oh. I said, which house is on fire? He goes, back of house. I said, which room in the house? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, the critical aspect as a first responder is 1, safety, 2, containment, and 3, resolution. So let's break it down. And so I asked and he had the role of innovation through PepsiCo. I said, are you a pull or push innovation team? He goes, oh. He goes, 50-50. I go, really? Come on. Which one? He goes, the BUs tell me what to do. I said, all right, so let's focus on that. So it's kind of fascinating. These discussions, it's all around, 1, your choice as a leader. I really believe that. And to me, this is what I think has been lacking, is the ability for leaders to step up and understand, listen, be sensitive, be empathetic, at the same time, be decisive.
And I want to layer in a question that came in through the chat along the lines of culture. So you're talking about leadership, yeah, and sort of how that permeates the organization. There is another question regarding the post-COVID world as it relates to employee engagement and around perks. You know, how do we maintain company culture and maintain attractiveness of recruiting and these things in this post-COVID world where we're not all together and you don't even get to meet your new colleagues in person. Right. I also want to leave a few minutes because we're starting to run short on time here on winners and losers. So if anyone wants to just take that one really quickly around sort of company culture and sort of people engagement.
Very quickly, just because we were more at home, it's a question of degree. I think we'll work more at home, but not exclusively. So you're gonna have to, again, leadership, you're gonna have to stage and plan so that your employees can meet in smaller groups over time and develop the culture. I think what the big tech companies have done is, in that respect, is perfect. I mean, they basically say to most employees, voluntary, you don't have to work from home, but you can, all the way to 2021. They expect to have 20% of their employees on campus any given day from now until the end of 2021. And they expect that that should be enough to maintain the culture for new people and so forth. So we have to continue to do the work, but we also cannot be absolutists. I mean, work from home 3 days a week, 4 days a week, yes, but you still probably should plan some time in the office with other members of your team with social distancing to get that culture working.
Can I just add one quick thing? I just had a conversation with one of my students. He's at one of the FANG companies, and I said, hey, what's the culture like there? It's fantastic. I get free food all the time, and they'd ship me to my office by bus. That's how he defines the culture. That's how he is associated. And so I think with this COVID thing, it's going to require companies to have an active conversation of what culture means to them, what the culture actually is. It can't be free kale and Wi-Fi on a bus. That's not culture.
Right. It is for your student, though.
Yeah, you know what company I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's bread and circus, right? The thing is to get them boundary and a bespoke culture framework that makes they feel as they are part of it, where you have mentorship, ongoing, virtual as well as hybrid, right? There are tons of ways to drive virtual water cooler discussions. And to me, it's all about the ability to build a bespoke culture that gives you planned and unplanned collaboration. And that's where the culture really starts to thrive.
Well, I'd love to talk about this issue more deeply in our future of work conversation. Sure. I think it's a really good place for it. So maybe we can mark that as a component of that session. Mm-hmm. So since we're kind of drawing towards a close, and then I want to have a final poll at the end as well. I'm going to combine two questions together. So one is any insights, just quick tidbits on winners and losers from the, who's going to survive, who's not going to survive, or who's going to have the biggest challenge. And I want to combine that for the roundtable with a question related to what Berkeley can do with faculty or students to best adapt and innovate how we interact with industry and provide, whether it's through collaborative lab areas, courses for students or professionals, other kinds of engagement, to help with making the winners. I mean, to really help as many companies as possible turn the corner into the post-COVID world in a thriving way. So opening to whoever wants to jump in on that.
Well, in terms of winners, I just have a slightly different take on that, and that is that if we look at what's happened with the world wars and other extremely disruptive events, it accelerated technologies. We know this is doing that. Unfortunately, on a geopolitical level, the US will be encumbered with this more than any other nation, which on the downside has terrible economic impact. But on the positive side, the US will be forced into this forced accelerated path. So when Europe and the rest of the world somewhat goes back to business, the US will be forced to solve these problems, which is basically the new 21st century, right, in terms of how we're dealing with these things. And so that this forcing function, to use Ken's term, it's going to be forced on the US. So the US will win in terms of the insights. If we have Zoom fatigue, there's a solution there. We don't know what it is yet, but I can bet it's going to be found in the US, right? Because we are going to be forced to solve it for longer than the others.
I think for Berkeley and innovation, I think Ikhlaq, I heard you saying, I don't know, 4 years ago or something, that you wanted innovation as a solver of important problems, the essence of necessity. And I think now is the time to emphasize that. And I think you have in your center with Stacey and Ken and others, an opportunity and a real leadership to take in, again, channeling innovation to solve the problems that have occurred as a result of this pandemic. And I think, that should be your North Star. And then you can hold a lot of roundtables, discussion with companies. You have access to so many students from all over the world, future entrepreneurs. But I think you should adopt that as, again, your compass.
So we're basically on listening mode on this particular question, but really appreciate both of those comments, both in terms of how this challenge will create opportunities and this focus on what are the real issues happening. And I think it's all very aligned. We have a whole set of X labs. We have which are very applied industry labs. We have courses which are aligned with challenges. We have teaching mechanisms, related to mindset and behavior. So, how we can, focus on any what are the future X labs? What are the things that we should do in our courses? How should we engage? We're trying to translate what everyone in the community, both attendees and the panelists, are saying about what we should proactively do.
So Ikhlaq, I want to add just a shameless plug in it, just as a reminder, because I see Jill Finlayson is in attendance. So winners and losers. There's huge distortions in the market because of this pandemic. But what that ultimately results is this conversation about winners and losers. And it's tough because, that's not what we're in the business of doing, is to say this group is good, this group is bad, this group should be saved, this company shouldn't be. That's, that's really tough. And I know governments have a struggle with this. What I would say is that Berkeley's trying to do now, or at least our group, is to have a conversation around ethics. So we're planning on teaching a class next spring on just what, as innovators, what is our responsibility? Especially before this, we were planning on having a class like this on responsible innovation in the era of AI. But maybe we need to broaden that conversation as responsible innovation in the era of COVID, when there's a full reordering of things, reprioritization, and this digital divide that Ikhlaq talked about, where there's us, we're all on Zoom, but the vast majority of people in the US are not. Their jobs could not go virtual, right? They don't have agency. They don't have this choice of, oh, I can go into work or I can be virtual. No, they've got to work in factories. They have to work in supply chain, shipping, things like that. And ironically, most of these companies that we work for or work with in innovation, we're quietly finding ways to remove those jobs out of the market, the ones that are physical jobs that aren't digital, because they're human contact jobs that are at the highest risk of passing on COVID. So ironically, we on this side of the digital divide are finding ways to get rid of jobs on the other side. And because of safety, we're using that as an argument. So this is a conversation we I think desperately need to have about what is the ethical way to conduct ourselves as innovators in this incredibly complex present that we're living in.
Great, thank you for adding that, Ken. So I think, appreciate everyone's input. We'll have a couple closing remarks from Ken and Ikhlaq, but I'd like to have a final poll, Jennifer, if you can pull this up, related to the question of how the SCET at UC Berkeley can be focusing our energies and on what topics the audience is most interested in this roundtable series. So hopefully our poll will stay up and everyone will get to participate. But if you could, mark all that are interesting to you and relevant to explore related to a post-COVID world and in interaction engagement with UC Berkeley, X Labs, executive programs, et cetera. So the topics are future of work, supply chain and manufacturing, healthcare, future of travel, education, entertainment.
And Stacey, I think there are a bunch of questions around education that maybe you would like to let people know about the next roundtable.
Oh yes, right. The next roundtable is actually coming up in 2 weeks, and the topic is the reset of education. And I think that's being, Ken, you'll be facilitating that conversation, correct?
Yeah.
Great. So hopefully we can.
And that's one of the highest request topics too.
Wow.
We seem to luckily hit that one perfectly.
And I did not create a bot to do that. Just
Great. So, well, that's really good to know, and we'll be capturing this so that we can prioritize the upcoming roundtable events and invite you back again and other panelists to discuss those topics. So just open it up for Ken and Ikhlaq to have any closing remarks before we sign off for the day.
I just want to thank our Australian colleagues who are in this panel. It was 3 in the morning and 5 in the morning when this thing started for them, and you look completely awake. I know it's probably not true, but you guys, thank you for being troopers and doing this for us.
The new normal is you know, working in different time zones.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and actually, my closing comments are equally short and to the point, which is this has been really helpful. You know, we all have ideas about what's going on and how we should be participating. From the beginning, I wanted these to be in part a discussion of the future, but in part like a mini advisory board meeting, so that we can listen to the different signals and be able to kind of head in the right direction as far as the center. So I just appreciate really, you know, you know, it's like you've got tactical information, you've got on the ground information about all the people you're talking to, you see patterns that we don't always see. So I just appreciate, you know, all the input that we've been getting. It's been fantastic. And to echo Ken, thanks for all the people in different time zones. I know when I get calls to be on something at like 4 in the morning, it's never all that pleasant. So thanks for doing it.
And anyone who has any job opportunities for our students, please let me know. I've got several incredibly talented students whose job offers were rescinded at some amazing companies because they weren't hiring anymore. So, but from engineers all the way to business kids, fantastic. So let me know.
And I want to end by acknowledging Jennifer Nice, who's been our curator and helping with the technology. Thank you for all the coordination and support for our roundtable, and to our roundtable panelists, to Ikhlaq and Ken. Thank you so much, and thanks for everyone for joining us. We hope to see you in one of our upcoming roundtables. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay.